Hello, hello. Zeteo here. Welcome to another Beyond All Reason replay analysis. Today we're going to be taking a quick look at Perfi as they play this 1v1 on Canis River versus NuttyWombat. Let's get into it. Alright, I'm going to speed up this first part a bit. Let's see. Perfi decides to go for a 2 max solar into 3rd max. And then 2nd solar into a vehicle lab. Alright, so right away, I want to talk about some stuff. So just talking about starting positions here. So NuttyWombat has chosen to go on this high ground here, and Perfi's on this lower ground. So it would have been over here if he chose the high ground. So this kind of matters a lot, just starting positions in general, and I think this map's kind of interesting when it comes to all that. So Perfi's spot makes it easier to control the river crossings on this side. These two left-hand sides. Just in case anybody doesn't know, you cannot pass the river in most cases, but you can in this spot, and it's the same on the bottom. This spot here. All the other spots are impassable. So this is going to allow him to control this a lot easier, and get to his opponent's side of the map pretty easily. So that that means being able to come up here fairly easily, but at the same time, going vehicle means not being able to get up here as easily because of the terrain here, the steepness of going up there. So bots, I think, would be better in this position, given that it's kind of a position that's capable of it's like the main function is being capable of doing that. Otherwise, if your whole thing is to defend this area and this area and try to just control stuff, you're not going to be able to control here either. This is like just kind of too far away in a way. But as it happens, NuttyWombat has chosen to spawn on the hill here, on the mountain, or whatever you want to call it, the plateau. So Nutty's really far away from that position as well. So it kind of works out for Perfi because that's just a big distance, right? The other thing to note is the high grounds. NuttyWombat has, started on the high ground, so controlling here is going to be pretty easy. It's pretty short distance to that area, right? For Perfi, on Perfi's side, it's going to be kind of difficult to control this area and control, down here, right? So what that means is, bots and stuff can pretty easily get up here and just run around into your base every which way, right? Because there's just so many paths and stuff, and so early on, defending that is kind of a tough thing, especially considering it's very likely that the starting radar is in this area, right? Because you want to have a radar early, but you want to put it in a good spot, so you try to put it out a little bit, or maybe as you move your commander out and stuff like that. But then you have these hills here. These hills block it, so you only have so much vision. So all this is going to matter. It's going to come into play. Let's see, so Perfi adds on some energy. Okay, 2 scouts into constructor. A bit of a stall here. Small blunder. Okay, now moving out. So the thing is, when you stall on energy, I feel like it's really important to try to rectify that early on, especially when it comes to building your initial constructors. So this is already a bit behind, and metal's starting to run out, so it kind of makes sense to to go for some metal. But I feel like at that time, a few more energies or a few more wind turbines would be good. All right, so there's that radar, and as you can see, there's some spotty coverage because of the mountains here. There's a grunt. The scouts get picked off. I don't believe that they really did too much there. Alright, get that grunt. Okay. Yeah, and already this is a bit rough because this whole area, like as grunts run through these areas up here, it's very easy for them to just pull back. And then that pulls you away from this area here. Your main, defensive zone early on, and so now you got to worry about like this area over here because it's so, you know, such a distance. Um, the other thing I'll mention here is this laser tower is not exactly ideal, because if we look at the passability of these bots here, the like they can pass like right through here, you know. So this is kind of like a big gap here, um, you know, that units can run through, and NuttyWombat has identified that and run through there pretty easily. Very nice job on Nutty's parts. But I also understand like you don't really want to move your commander like all the way up here to build a tower or something like that, because you're trying to build these mechs as well, right? So kind of rough. Kind of rough. So energy is looking pretty good at this point. Since the commander moved out, like he doesn't, you know, you don't need as much energy because you're not boosting as much, and so you kind of have to wait for your metal to build up to build more energy. And now would be that time. So the energy now is not good shape. And notice that it's not because the wind's low. The wind's actually near max right now. And so Perfi has decided to add on some more wind, so that's great. I would just say that this is perhaps a little bit too slow here, because ideally you want to do it before you actually run out. You know, ideally you do it like around here or something when your energy bar's around there, and that's maybe what happens. But you know, it's going to cost some energy to build these as well, so it's something you want to try to plan for a bit. In fact, let me talk about the wind a bit on this map. So 4 to 14 is, you know, it's obvious, you know, it's better than solar, right? You know, if you just look at the numbers, it's better to have wind than solar if you're trying to conserve metal for other things. So wind is great, but, or I should say also, you know, the wind minimum is 4. So like, you know, it's not going to go super low, so like it's, you know, it's pretty reasonable to have wind for that reason as well. But the maximum is only 14, which means, you know, it's not going to be stellar in a lot of cases. It's just going to be okay. And given that, solar basically will be more like time efficient, given how low the winds, you know, given the parameters of the winds. The solar is going to be kind of a good choice for when you really need that energy. And I think one of the things that's really important to consider when deciding, you know, if you're going to go solar or winds, is just how many mexes are you able to get. You know, if your plan is to rapidly expand and like claim all this stuff, you're going to need energy pretty quickly, or you're going to need to build on this energy a lot, or start building it a lot sooner, because it's going to take that much more winds to build up enough energy to support all this stuff. So, you know, basically that's going to mean more constructors, you know, as an opener, but then that means it's harder to defend this entire area. So it's, you know, it's hard to do that kind of stuff. And now these grunts are perhaps exploiting the fact that this is so far away from your main base that it's going to be harder for you to defend it. Yeah, so this constructor gets in trouble. Notice that there is no radar in this area yet. There is one here. I guess your commander placed that one there, and it does have some vision. But, you know, if you're trying to expand here, it doesn't cover that. And you're going to see these grunts late. You know, so ideally you'd have one, you know, somewhere in this general area to be able to see like all the way the heck out here. But there's also this high ground that blocks it. So it's sort of like, well, do you really need, you know, that radar, because it can only see so far anyways. And that's kind of a big deal here, is this high ground, you know, until you get a radar on the high grounds, you know, probably up here somewhere, right? It's going to be very easy for grunts to slip through, because this whole area is going to be like in the shadow where they can't be seen. And so, you know, anyone being aggressive can kind of exploit that. Can they run up here? Oh, I guess they can. Ew. I guess I didn't realize that. They can actually run up these ridges here. So there's that as well. That's actually even more of an area than I thought. So yeah, having a radar, you know, basically with your starting spot, controlling this area here is just vital. You know, obviously you want to also control the other bridges, right? As much as you can. And unfortunately, because of the placement of this LLT, your units have to be kind of over here as well to, you know, to guard against anything that slips through here. But yeah, Wombat's testing the waters, running around with all these grunts. You know, grunts are so cheap, so they can really be everywhere. And so you've got a nice response team over here on the right. Nice response team on the left. So when your vehicle against bots, you know, you can pretty much assume that they're going to be grunts and not pawns because they're just so much more efficient. But they're going to be everywhere, you know, if your vehicle, because, you know, vehicles take that much longer to build and you're going to have less of them because they're that much more expensive too. You know, whereas, you know, the grunts, they just keep pumping out and pumping out and pumping out, and NuttyWombat still hasn't even spent all the metal. Now granted, Perfi has built up a nice bank of metal given all these expansions, and in fact, Perfi is ahead on metal income right now. And that's great considering, you know, vehicles, right? But because the energy has been in such a tough shape because this was late, now you know, he can't really spend that metal, and so he's kind of trying to play catch up. Seeing how bad the situation is, adding on these solars here. But ideally, of course, you know, realizing that that's going to be an issue before it even happens, by noticing that the winds is where it is, you know, 4 to 14. I'd say, you know, even if it went up to like 15, 16, I would say, you know, given that it's 1v1 and there's going to be a lot of metal for you to work with, you know, building some solar earlier is going to be nice. Let's see, so Perfi kind of bouncing around looking for damage with the crew here. NuttyWombat having a nice little raid in the back here. Bit of a vulnerability. I think LSR was suggesting to put like an LT on either side just to prevent raids, because losing your energy on a map like this is a very big deal. It's kind of in a way that kind of can end the game if there's enough damage on the energy. So you gotta be very careful. You know, I guess to put that into perspective for people, like when you're this low on energy, your light laser towers might not fire. Your commander can't degun. And if your commander tries to degun, everything will pause, which means you're slowing down all your production to get all, you know, to store up enough energy to use that degun. This is of course assuming that you have the option set. I think it's in, yeah, conserve energy when degunning under game. Probably have to be on advanced options for that. In case, you know, just in case anyone's wondering about that, if anybody else is watching, I'm sure that's something Perfi already knows, so I'm not gonna, you know, I'm not doing that for his sake. But yeah, energy's still very dire situation, and I would even argue, like, anytime your energy's in this bad of shape, and maybe you don't realize that it's in that bad of shape, but whenever it is that bad, whenever it's like completely out, especially on this kind of map, and you start banking up like a lot of metal because you're so low, throw down some solars with your commander. Like, not only like correct it in your base, but correct it with something quick, like your commander who can just like put down that solar really quickly. As it happens, the actual other issue is this geo here. So your energy wasn't quite that high to get this geo. And you might have some numbers in your head, like, you know, like, oh, I have, you know, 400 energy income, so a geo's fine. But the state of the game is, or the state of your economy is, you have, you know, you have a decent amount of build power. You have a lot of metal to work with, but not very much energy. And so when you plop this down and try to build it, you know, it costs a lot of energy per second. It's 89 per second with just the builder. You know, and that's, you know, that's not terribly significant, but then you're also adding on this construction turret. And that adds, you know, potentially another basically 200 energy. You know, and I get that number because, you know, the build power of the construction vehicle is 90. If it's using 89 energy, we'll round that up to 90, right? And then we'll just say that this construction turret having 200 build power will basically use 200. So it's just kind of a lot for these two things working on it. Considering that you have a lot of metal to work with, your energy already is not in the best of spots, and you do have a lot of build power to like spend, you know, try to spend elsewhere. So that is potentially going up very, very slowly. Oh, I feel like this is a bit late, the radar. I mean, maybe understandably you wanted to LLT this area because your commander's out here in the open. And just, you know, having the LTs at the choke is of course a good idea. But yeah, knowing what you're up against is so important. Okay, so your LLTs are actually even turning off here. So yeah, that's how big of a blunder this is, unfortunately. Alright, so yeah, even plopping down some extra solars here real quick. Not really the ideal thing to be doing as your geo's finishing up, but you're kind of, you know, you're in that rough spot that you kind of need to. Alright, so you got some blitzes coming here. Okay, so this is something I actually just missed a little bit. So for a little while, Perfi had the blitzes here, and the all the grunts were like up here, you know, to guard against the blitzes. I think Nutty has chosen, or chose to move these guys over here because Nutty noticed that these LTs are barely working, which means Perfi does not have a D-gun. And so, you know, rushing in there with a whole lot of grunts means one dead commander, right? And I think that's a great choice by Nutty. I think that's really smart. You know, being able to notice that and stuff is like, you know, not an easy thing to do. But then Perfi takes the opportunity and says, well, if you're going to send all that stuff going for my commander, I'm going to counterattack down here. Another great choice. Great choice. Nutty's response to that is potentially moving grunts over there, but also potentially counterattacking up here. It says, well, if you're going to go for my base, I'm going to send what I can to defend down here and move these guys in. And I think that's really you know, I think all this is really smart. This is all really good stuff. Unfortunately, I think this is a bad decision here. So Perfi had all those blitzes basically around here. At least this group was around there with the additional 4 back here. That makes a total of 16. Looking back here, and this is after production has probably made a few of these, but there's only 10 grunts and 2 LLTs. And I think you could easily run in here with that. Now, of course, you have to also deal with, you know, all the grunts popping out of the factory as quick as they are. So, like, you know, there's a chance that you wouldn't be able to do that much damage, but I think you'd be able to get some stuff done back here with the winds, especially. And given that you're so close to that, and given that his army was already like over here by the time you like decided to, well, maybe it wasn't there, maybe it was like more back here. I mean, either way, you're not going to really catch up to him at this point. So sending them to defense, you know, not really ideal either. It would have been better just to counterattack, I think. Potentially you could do, you know, you could swing down here instead, but this is low value considering, you know, you're probably going to deal with all the reinforcements and there's probably LTs, right? And you're just getting a few mexes. You know, the energy is actually a bigger deal. So, yeah, I think over here would have been really good. Whoops, spectators off. Okay. All right. Grunt's running in. Perfi's responding. Now the blitz is faster, just by a bit though, so it's like going to take some time to catch up. And those other grunts running through as well, so that's kind of rough. Alright, so you go into Janus production. I feel like blitzes are, you know, like the faster unit is always going to be a better choice for defense. Because, you know, the grunts are going to be able to avoid it. I don't know if the, you know, the Janus was just something you were doing and that's just what they are right now. But anytime you see units start to slip through, I'd say a really good thing to maybe try to remember to do is to just like queue up, you know, just add like a bunch of blitzes in really quick. Insert them into the queue and just produce like 5 or 10. But yeah, as it is, you actually didn't take too much damage. I assumed that was going to be worse. The real thing though is the fact that your army's pulled all the way back here, which means, you know, units can continuously stream through here. This is broken as well, so they can stream through here. And now you're basically, you know, putting out fires all over the place, and the fires are going to just grow and grow and grow because this is wide open. So in a way, that's kind of game right there. But yeah, you are working up a lot of Janus. You're starting to actually start to spend that metal, which is great. Lots and lots of Janus and medium tanks, okay. Personally, I'm not a big fan of medium tanks against grunts. I mean, obviously they're using medium tanks as well, so like, you know, it's kind of good to have. But yeah, medium tanks can miss a lot of shots against grunts, and that's going to leave your Januses rather vulnerable. Now you do have some blitzes, but I would say a few blitzes in the queue I think would help you a lot here too. Is all I mean to say. That was a weird Janus shot. Yeah, so instead of using everything to chase after this, and granted this looks kind of scary because there's so many dots and they're so spread out and there's so many different ways that these can punish you, but you really need to also prioritize closing the gap. Otherwise it's just more and more grunts are going to be coming in, and now these units are going to be potentially surrounded, encircled. Not a good place to be. Now granted, you know, your army's not weak by any means, so I mean, I feel like you can potentially do that. Okay, so you do reinforce this area with these Dragon Claws, so that's great. So commander's still there. But yeah, I think trying to close this eventually, I mean, that's kind of rough. I mean, you do have a Dragon's Claw over here to kind of get you started. Like maybe making a defense here. It's just wide. It's so many areas for them to like run through, so it's just so rough. This is a grunt stream, a grunt's army stream, and then even having the medium tanks and pounders streaming up here as well. Yeah, Nutty hasn't even spent all the metal, so it's just like a lot of army that isn't there that could be there. I'm just imagining like that many more grunts. It's just like, holy crap. Yeah, I mean, having 2 bot labs and the vehicle lab. Oh man. Okay, reasonable micro to pull back here. I mean, Januses are so much better being pulled back because they get those like long shots. Oh! Oh no! I almost missed it. So this is how the game ends. Obviously Perfi and Wombat know this, but anybody watching, I hope you see the issue here. We're gonna slow it way down. So all these Januses are shooting at the units. The commander walks in front and takes a whole lot of Janus shots in the back. And that's game. I hope you guys liked that one. Nice little short one. But yeah, I think the major thing, of course, is the geo and, you know, balancing your energy, because that was a bit rough for a lot of the game. Definitely the biggest part of you know, things to correct. And I think you know that already. I don't need to harp on that. But I do want to point out that the high ground here is just so important. You know, because it's so easy to just move around as as you know, bots, and as vehicles, you're stuck to the ramp, to using the ramps, and you know they're gonna move slower going up the ramp. It's not terribly steep, but at the same time, it's just you know, it's just wasted. You know, it's lost time. You know, making it harder to get up there and defend. Um, you know, compared to bots. Um, so yeah, I would argue if you're going to do vehicles on this map, and I would definitely argue that this is, you know, a more bot favored map because of all the high grounds and stuff. Also because of the shorter distances and the openness of it. Like early on, I would say bots are stronger when it comes to like shutting stuff down early. Um, you know, because grunts are so cheap and get produced so quickly. You know, your commander can just sit there and pump out a lot of grunts and harass the, you know, harass all the metal expansions. So it's kind of hard to expand like that. And given that the map's not like, you know, crazy huge or anything like that, um, it's just really hard to actually defend these locations. And then yeah, the radar, very important. Um, you know, you had a radar down here eventually, but like having one earlier with the expansion, I think is crucial. It's definitely something I've seen. You know, some of the top 1v1 players do is as they expand out, they make sure that there's radar coverage. You know, and you know, and most of the time you're thinking of that in terms of where the commander is, but you got to think about all the side paths as well. You know, and I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that people make on something like CCR, where you need like several radar out there, you know, as you expand in order to see stuff. And if you don't see it coming, you can't really do anything about it. So like they just show up and yeah. Um, and also on CCR, like the you know the map's so big that your forces are not going to be able to react unless you have a lot of time to react with. So that radar, you know, the radar coverage is very important. Um, but yeah, just like this high ground is such a vulnerability because it's hard to get radar up there from this position. So I feel like if you're going to start vehicles, this is not really the ideal spot, although I think it's the intuitive spot. Um, Now, where the ideal spot is, I can't really tell you, mainly because like all these spots, you know, have give and takes. Um, but I would just argue that being closer to the mountain is going to be better. So like maybe this spot up here. Um, you know, if you go up here, then you just have to worry about this one area, small area here. Put an LT, right? And then your army streams down here, and it's very easy for them to defend and reinforce these different locations. And then you know after the initial opener or like early game, you can start expanding to down here as well and close this off perhaps. But that's all going to depend on where your opponent spawns and how quickly and easily they can reinforce and defend it. So if they're streaming like a bunch of units down here, well, it's probably not going to be easy to like get here and defend it, right? You have to like push through all their units. Um, yeah. And then for bots, like I would actually argue that I don't really like Nutty's position for bots. I mean, it's definitely a safer position. For the same reason, like units streaming down here means all this stuff is gonna just naturally be a lot safer because those reinforcements can go which way, right? So middle's kind of nice, right? On a 1v1 map, especially considering that you have, you know, these natural choke points in the middle. Being in the middle of your area means you can, you know, easily reinforce either. Um, so I feel like this spot on the hill, although it's safer because it's high ground, would have been a little bit better if it was here instead, or maybe even here to like reinforce these spots. Um, you know, which way. Anyways, I hope that clears some or you know gets some information out there. Because I think some of this stuff is oftentimes overlooked when it comes to a map. Like, you know, where's the high ground? How is that going to affect how I defend stuff? Like, is it going to be easy for grunts to run through here or not? You know, and realizing that before the game even starts, you can kind of make a plan, like, oh, this is how I want to handle it. Same thing with the energy stuff, making a plan for, like, getting in your head, like, oh, it's 14 max, and there's kind of a lot of metal out there, so I'm gonna need to either start my wins a little bit earlier and really keep up with that, or I should be ready to plop down a bunch of solar if necessary. But if you go the solar route, then it's like, well, now I'm spending a bunch of metal on solar, and ideally you want to put that into win so that you can spend some of that excess metal on more units, right? Um, so a lot of things to consider, and obviously the way you play is up to you, but those are the things that I'm seeing at any rates. Um, but yeah, for anybody watching out there, I hope you guys have learned something. There's a lot to be said with any given game. Um, so yeah, I'm gonna go. Thanks for watching, and see you guys around.